Unlikely that I actually did.
That's okay. All right. So everyone open your packets or whatever to 268.
Where do you want to go?
268. Here we go. We are at the, for you, because you're looking at the actual Gemara, we're probably like a little bit down on 6a.
Here.
Okay, so we're going to review a little bit about of what we did last week, just because I think that will be useful for everybody, and then we'll kind of move on. But the fundamental question we're going to get into is, right, what is it that what does it really mean to transgress? Like, what does it mean for me not to have done what I'm supposed to do, such that I've transgressed the prohibition of you shall not delay, right? That's what we're going to spend time.
Cleaning my room, emptying the dishwasher.
Right. So the specificity is exactly what we're going to talk about. So I want to just review what we did last week, and it'll start for you with Tanu Rabbanan Motza Sifata.
Yep.
Sifatecha.
He says it's a thing.
What?
He says it's a thing.
Right. Okay, so we're on the top of 268 or on 6a, and I have these pages here with the verses, which I think will be useful. So you and I can share, and you guys can have that. So the sages taught in a Baraita. The verse states, "That which is gone out of your lips you shall keep and do, as you have vowed as a gift to the Lord your God, which you have promised with your mouth," which comes from Deuteronomy. And if you notice, the order is funky on our sheet, but 23:24 and 23:22. We just read 23:24, and it's like right in the same section of all the stuff we're talking about. Right, so it's the second one on the sheet. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go word by word and explain it, which we did last week, so we're not gonna spend so much time with it. That which has gone out of your lips, this is a positive mitzvah. You shall keep, which is another quote from the verse, this is a prohibition, as the phrase you shall keep is a warning to keep oneself from sinning, right? And that's something that the Gemara is going to point out all the time, over and over and over again, that phrase you shall keep. And do, this is an admonition to the court to make you fulfill your vow. As you have vowed, this is referring to a vow offering to the Lord your God. This is referring to sin offerings, guilt offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings, teaching that one must keep their word and bring them, right? So to the Lord your God, the rabbis are understanding, means your commitment to God. As a gift, this is understood in the literal sense to be referring to a gift offering, which you have promised. This is referring to objects consecrated for temple maintenance. With your mouth, this is referring to vows of charity to which one commits themselves with their mouth. Okay, so that's the whole verse, kind of split up into all the little sections. Yes?
In that time, wouldn't all of the promises, vows, or whatever be with your mouth? I mean, if you're verbalizing it, other than if it's in your mind and you're thinking it, you make a promise to God in your mind, but you don't verbalize it.
Okay,
But
so...
everything else is with your mouth. I mean, they weren't going to write it down.
Absolutely, they might write it down. Yeah,
Would they? And that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, contracts and things like that. Remember, so if you just like for...
You're not going to do a written contract to God.
That's true. A reminder that vows like this are done like in front of the court.
Okay.
But you're right.
It's still
the more
with your
often
lips.
than not, yeah, it's going to be someone has said
I'm going to
verbally.
do this, I promise you that, I will give you this, but you're going to verbalize it.
Correct. So one question might be, okay, what would this even mean if I didn't have that lips part? Right?
Nobody else would hear it.
Right. Well, so
Nobody can hold you accountable because if it wasn't verbal, or
Right.
nobody heard it.
Exactly.
But God knows.
Right.
So you're still accountable.
Perhaps.
No loophole.
So I think the important piece is that it does need to be out loud.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone with me so far? I know we kind of ran through that. Yeah?
Do you...
Everybody with me?
Yeah. I don't know. Does it all sit well with you? Does it all... So when you split it apart and take apart all the pieces, do you look at this and go like, oh yeah, I can buy this, or does it feel
right? So the Gemara,
flimsy?
so the Gemara finds a couple of things where it says, well, wait a second, But I think more
Right now, how are you holding?
me personally.
Without anything else that the Gemara is going to do.
Right, so I've read ahead a little bit, but I think
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
so I think that all in all, a lot of this stuff makes sense. When it says "as you have vowed," it refers to a vow offering. That seems pretty obvious, as far as I'm concerned. There are a couple of things which the Gemara does jump on, like "and do," which is an admonition to the an admonition to the court to make you fulfill your vow. Right, that one feels flimsy, and the Gemara spends time on that one. One of the other things that is something I just don't know much about, which is the which you have promised part at the end. This is referring to objects consecrated for temple maintenance. But the question might be, why is that different than something else, perhaps? So, but I think if we just do the meta conversation of how Gemara works, this isn't that different.
No, you know the really classic one. There's a thing in I think it's in Exodus of Moses getting the Torah, but it's the one place where it says, and God gave you the Torah and the instruction and the tablets upon which you were instructed the law. And there's an exact replica of this. It's a Tanu Rabbanan where it cuts it apart and says, the tablets, these are the tablets. The Torah, this is the 5 books of Moses. The instruction, this is Nevi'im and Ketuvim. And then the next 2 things and this is the oral law. And then the next one is the Midrash. And you're like, wait, what? Moses got handed a thing and it looks like it's just the 2 tablets, old school style, like Charlton Heston, but it's actually like, and also this. But wait, there's more. And it's like
Carrying a library.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the
down
only,
mountain.
and it's the only place in all of Jewish literature where we find out that God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, and the Tanakh, because otherwise it's kind of like implied, but not.
Right.
It's divine order. But anyways, it's identical to this.
Right. So
structure.
this structure is something. First of all, I think is valuable for us. Like, there are certain things that the Gemara does that we're not really allowed to do anymore, but this isn't one of them. This to me feels like something all of us could do, where we could take a piece of text and break down each word and say, well, this actually could mean this could mean that. Maybe not in a halachic sense where we're going to pull law from it necessarily, but potentially. Okay. So now we've gone through all of this list. We sort of like some of it, other parts of it we find don't work for us necessarily. And the Gemara comes back and clarifies some of the details. The master said, right, just quoting the Baraita above, that which has gone out of your lips, this is a positive mitzvah. And then the Gemara asks, why do I need this derivation? Isn't the positive mitzvah derived from the verse, and there you shall come, and there you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, and your tithes, and the offering of your hand, and your vows, and your gift offerings, the firstborn of your herd, of your flock, which comes from Deuteronomy? Right, meaning to say, I have this verse from Deuteronomy, which should be here, 12:5, or at least half of it, right, because it's 12:5 and 12:6. Right, and we might say to ourselves, okay, I have this long list where God is saying, you have to bring all these things. Why do I need an extra thing to tell me that I need to do it? I already know that, right? So it's as if I said, using your example of cleaning the room, right? So I said, okay, you need to clean your desk and off your bed and your closet and what's on your chair.
By 7 o'clock tonight.
Right? And then somewhere else I say, and you need to clean your room. The question is, why do I need you to tell me clean your room? You already told me all the things I need.
But you didn't say dust, vacuum, sweep, whatever. There's always something that might be missed, so we need to be more specific.
Right, so here,
And
the challenge is that this is generic.
Yeah.
Right, so we have the specificity somewhere else. So the question is, why did you need to tell me to clean my room when I knew all the other things you told me to do? That's the tension. And you're saying, one possible solution is, well, maybe it didn't cover everything. Yeah, which is totally...
I would have only done what was specifically said. I'd have left everything else out.
Nice, you're very particular. I like it.
Well, less to do by 7 o'clock tonight.
So then, is everybody with me so far?
Yes.
We're here?
We're here.
Right, so we have this tension between the specificity and the generic. So the Baraita continues with the question. The same kind of question. And you shall keep. This is a prohibition. Why do I need this? Isn't it already derived from the thing we've been talking about for pages and pages? You shall not delay paying it. Which just comes from one verse or 2 verses before, right? Meaning to say, I have this thing, I seem to already know it. Why am I being told it a second time? That's the question that Gemara is going to spend time rubbing over. Is everybody with me so far? Yeah? Okay.
They're not.
That's okay.
They're not with it anymore.
They're little ones. They
gave
need
up.
to. That's all right. They're reading their own books.
Pete the Cat's a great book and very advanced for this age. We read it 2 nights ago.
Okay. So now we're in the 3rd paragraph where it says V'asita and do. Again, this is what we covered last week, so we're just reviewing some of the pieces here.
Okay.
And do. This is a warning to the court to make you fulfill your vow. Meaning to say, I have made this vow in front of the court, right? Because that's how vows are made in the context of the Gemara. And therefore, presumably, what we're being told is that the court then has the power to make me do it. Why do I need this derivation? This rule is derived from the verse, he shall offer it, which is in Leviticus, which you can find here in the text. As it was taught in a Baraita. The verse states, he shall offer it, which teaches that he must be forced to bring his offering. Right, that one I find a little flimsy, so does the Gemara, right? One might have thought that he may be forced to bring his offering even against his will. Therefore, the verse states in Leviticus 1:3, right, so let me back up. Let's make sure we understand where the contradiction seems to be. In the verse in Leviticus, it says, he shall offer it, right? And then later on it says, in accordance with his will. Or it says lirtzono, right? So on his behalf in this translation. But
Does the in accordance with his will revert back to it's God's will, and the other one is the individual. The he shall offer it.
no, I think the person.
Right,
person.
one is God's will, one is the person's will.
Right, so here it's saying,
The person could be doing
right? No, so it's saying in the text, the
It's
person
for-
shall bring the offering,
Right.
to the tent of meeting for acceptance on the behalf of the human to God.
to God.
Right? So here, it would seem to say, right, according to the rabbis, we have a contradiction. If the court can force you to do it, but the offering has to be according to your will, those are in contradiction. If I don't want to and you're making me, I still don't want to, maybe it doesn't count. Right? It doesn't go through all those details, but that's the contradiction it's talking about. Is everybody with me? So I'm going to read the paragraph again. And do, which is a quote from our verse, this is a warning to the court to make you fulfill your vow. Meaning to say, I make a vow, right? I haven't fulfilled it yet. According to the Gemara in this verse, the court can force me to fulfill it. The rule that's derived, where this comes from, is from Leviticus, where it says, he shall offer it, and according to his will. Right? So we have, all right, let's pull that one out. Let's finish this section, we'll go back. That will help. One might have thought that this person may be forced to bring his offering against their will. Therefore, the verse states, and according to their will. How so? The court coerces him until he says, I want to bring the offering. Okay. So if you read with Leviticus in your mind, right, it says according to the person's will, right?
So terrible that if you don't want to do it, the outcome would be worse. So you will want to do it to avoid.
Perhaps, but at a minimum, it's telling us that it needs to be. I need to want to do it. Meaning to say, if I'm being forced to do something,
I'm going to want to do it to stop the torture.
that's certainly one option. Although I don't think the court was torturing anybody. God forbid.
All right, but what
Right,
was,
coercion.
exactly, but what would the court do if you still did not bring the offering or do it? If
So-
you're out of compliance,
right,
it's going to be...
Keep doing it.
Well, so the Gemara is saying this verse of Leviticus where it says according to that person's will, and saying that person has to, on some level, say out loud, I want to do this. And the coercion is to get them to say that and then to do it. As long as I say, I don't want to do it, then...
You're going to keep coercing you to want to do it.
Correct.
So
Correct.
you're going to want to do it just to stop the coercion?
Correct.
Yeah.
So then, our verse comes later to tell us and do, which is the court telling us, which is a warning to the court to tell us that we need to fulfill our vow, right? That they can coerce us. So then the question becomes, if I already knew that from Leviticus, why do I need to know that here? Is everybody with me?
She didn't get that yet.
Right.
Are you to the last line?
What?
Would I have this the last line, which is Ha Ketzad Tofinoto Ad Shiyomar Rotzani?
Right, so that's how do we get to Lirtzono?
You got that. You said that already.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do we get to Lirtzono? Right, so how do
That's
we get
a
there?
crazy line.
That we just say
What
more.
you're saying. How do we get to it's a voluntary offering, but the court is forcing you.
It's really not voluntary.
Right, so what does the Talmud do to solve this problem? How does this work? We force him until he says he wants to do it. Wait, what? And it's like, it's a voluntary offering. You are standing in front of a court and they're like twisting your arm like, say you want to do it. I want to do it! It's very weird.
Right, so I guess one question.
It's an internal Talmudic logic of a kind.
So I don't think it's as simple as that. Right? I gave this example last week, and it's not a good one, so you'll forgive me. Which is that I may not be great at doing the dishes, right? But my wife is certainly going to want me to want to do the dishes. I said I'm going to do the dishes.
Unless you break them sufficiently, she'd rather have you.
Right, well, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be on record saying that I'm breaking dishes. But, right, so the example being that if I've made a promise, the presumption is that I should want to fulfill my promise. Right? Right, and so it is kind of crazy for the Gemara to say, right, that we have the ability to force someone to want to fulfill their obligation, right? So we have all of this about being forced to, which is crazy in its own right. And then we have this thing where the Gemara is telling us this again, right? Where we're saying, and do. The verse is telling us in Deuteronomy, and do, which the Gemara understands is us telling the court, is the verse telling the court to force us, which means we have Leviticus telling us what? Is everybody with me? All right, let's back up.
Leviticus is the thing that's...
So Leviticus is Lirtzono, according to their will.
Right.
And what did we learn from that?
That it's a voluntary...
It's not that it's voluntary.
They want to do it?
It's forced voluntary. Right.
Forced voluntary.
Right? Meaning to say
Sorry.
that, no, it's okay. So the court has the ability to make me fulfill my obligation. Right? Remember, I made
that
this...
one. I was thinking above.
No, Kofin.
Everybody did everything they promised you. Nobody would have to write on it.
Yeah. Except human beings are still human beings. So...
I think I'm going to not do something sometime and see what happens.
So on one end we have Leviticus, which means what? We just said it. Forced voluntary, right? Meaning to say I've made an obligation, the court forces me to follow through. On the other hand, we have our verse from Deuteronomy, which says what? It's 23:24 on your sheet, if that's helpful. Va'asita, and do. Which the Gemara tells us what?
That it's Vasara Lebeitin Shi Asuka.
Exactly.
It's
what? A warning to who? The court that? Spell it out for me.
But the court has to force you to volunteer to
Correct.
do it.
So now I have Leviticus that tells me I have to be forced, and I've got Deuteronomy that tells me I have to be forced, which means what?
One's redundant.
One is redundant. Right. Well, I should definitely do what I'm supposed to do, but one's redundant. It means that I'm being told the same thing twice.
Which the Torah never does.
Presumably,
Everything in the Torah has to be...
Exactly right.
Lots of things in the Torah are redundant, but they need to be picked apart and applied separately.
Since the Torah has already set the precedent of having to be reminded, then it's perfectly normal for us to have to be reminded multiple times, and for us to remind our children multiple times. we're just doing a holy thing when we tell the kid 14 times to clean his room.
That's certainly true.
Right.
But I think the Gemara, the rabbis are uncomfortable with the idea.
That people don't do what they should do.
No, that the Torah is going to tell us the same thing twice. Because why would God, the presumption, right? This is the presumption of the Talmud, which is
Because
why would
created
God...
us not exactly perfect, so we
No,
don't
it's
do
not
it
about
when
us.
we're reminded.
It's not about us. Right? The Talmud is uncomfortable with the idea, the rabbis are uncomfortable with the idea that God would spend God's energy telling us the same thing twice when God could tell us two things separately. Because it's up to us to learn it, to recognize it, and say, oh my goodness, there's a repetition. I must learn something new from it. That's the presumption of the rabbis.
To invert or slightly change that, there's another way of saying that, which is leave God out of it. The rabbis, who are so committed to intellectual discourse and creative excursus, would never say, I've got these two verses, they're basically the same, why don't I just wash over them and say it's clean your room, when I can learn a new thing out of it.
So they're going back, they're reviewing what they were already supposed to do.
But sort of, he's saying that it's different. So when I say to my son in the morning, Iggy, it's time to get ready for school, you know what to do. And then 5 minutes later, he hasn't done anything. And then I say to him, Iggy, put on your shirt, put on your pants, put on your shoes. I have said the same thing, right? But I have said it two completely different ways.
More specific.
Right, which are more specific. So it's more that, I think.
Like a one
All your time and energy.
But wait a sec.
It's not repetition is the point.
Right,
Wait
a sec. It is repetition.
It is, but it isn't.
It is, but it isn't, right? The specificity is different.
Say your time being specific.
But the Talmud is uncomfortable with that existing in Torah. Right? It's okay in humans. We're fallible. But according to the rabbis, that shouldn't be possible in Torah. It means to say that repetition is a problem that needs to be resolved. And here we're being told we have this problem. And the last line in the Steinsaltz, if you look in the third paragraph, so it's not the actual text. It says, now, since all of these halachot are already known from other sources, right? Which was the positive mitzvah thing that we read. It was you shall keep as a prohibition, and this and do thing. The question is, why are all of these things here if we already knew them? And here's the answer. Can I get a volunteer? Maddie, will you read in the Aramaic? It's just the really short one. Yeah? Nice. All right, will you read the English now also?
English? Oh.
Yeah, so the question is, if we already knew all this stuff, why is this being repeated? And the answer?
The Gemara answers, one set of verses is referring to a case where one said that he vowed to bring an offering but did not yet set aside a specific animal for his vow. And one set of verses is referring to a case where he set aside a specific animal for his vow but did not yet sacrifice it on the altar.
Great. So the Gemara does this thing, right? We have an apparent contradiction, and how do we resolve contradictions? We say it's not a contradiction, they're referring to two separate things. It is the most classic thing that the Gemara does. So let's just back up and spend some time with these circumstances. So the first circumstance is what?
A person has set aside an offering but has yet to bring it.
Right. So in the Hebrew, in the Aramaic, it's Amar velo afrish, right? I've said it, meaning to say I vowed to bring an offering, but I did not set aside the animal. So what would the
did he specify when he vowed it which animal, what it would be?
No, he did.
That was very general.
No, so that is exactly the right question. Did not set aside a specific animal. So meaning to say, I said,
I'm bringing a goat.
Animal offering, but I didn't tell you whether it would be this one or that.
I'm bringing a goat. I didn't tell you whether it was Ed or Larry.
Exactly.
Are you bringing a male goat or a female goat?
Right. Could be Ed or Larry.
Right. It doesn't. Right. So then, let's just spell that out. Forget the text for the moment. Let's spell that out. I make a promise, right? I say, we'll use the example of the dinner party, because that's, I think, one of the best examples we have. I say, I vow to bring everyone in the Gemara class, right, to dinner at my house. but I don't want to specify when.
You should do that.
I should do
You
that.
also need to ask your wife first. We
I
just
do.
had this happen
I
2
do.
days ago.
There's an 80% chance Alana's working anyways.
So let's stick with the hypotheticals for the time being, right? So I make this vow, but I don't specify when it should be. At what point have I transgressed? You shall not delay.
After a year. Or 3 festivals.
I didn't specify when it was
Maybe
gonna be.
1 festival, possibly 6
Right.
festivals.
So our festival things, right?
Right, we go back into that.
Right. Well, that's all related. So one answer is it doesn't matter that I didn't specify when the dinner was. It's when I vowed it. Right? I vowed it, and therefore the clicker starts. The timer starts.
And if you said you were going to do it after Pesach, that gives you the full year to go around because
Right.
before the next
Right.
Pesach starts.
Depending on when
Well
the year
said.
when I
Exactly.
did it.
Well done.
Okay. Now the second example is what?
Set aside but didn't bring. Meaning you said, I am bringing a goat, I am bringing Ed, and then you never did it.
That goat is now for the temple. I'm not allowed to use it for anything else. It's set aside.
On March 27th, you're all invited to my house for a Talmud potluck Shabbat dinner. I'll send out evites soon. ... That never happens.
Right. I feel like in this example.
And I never mention it again, and I never go to Talmud class again.
Right. So the question becomes. So this is where the example actually breaks down, because we have to specify a date for that example.
Well, the
to
dinner
work.
party, yeah, but
Right.
Ed and Larry works great.
But Ed and
Because
Larry-
my examples always work great, yours not so much.
Here I was thinking that was a serious invite.
I will invite everyone for dinner.
So-
Seriously.
So
My house is bigger than his.
So,
Has
that's
more
true.
steps, though.
That's true.
Oh, wait, no, you have more steps.
we have a lot of steps.
You have a lot of steps.
So I specify a goat, but I don't actually bring the goat in. I don't use that goat for anything else, so I haven't transgressed that prohibition, right? Where I'm using something I shouldn't. But I've
It's
said
not eating your grass and cutting it for you and fertilizing your lawn. Maybe you want to take that goat home.
Yeah. But for whatever reason, I haven't brought it. So at what point do I transgress, you shall not delay?
It depends on when you said that, too.
So for us, we're marking, just because I'm not disagreeing, but we're marking the beginning of our vow. The moment I make the vow is when the timer starts. Is that right?
Right, but we're on the calendar.
So I want to, well, whatever it is, let's just, it doesn't really matter. Right, no, because we've already done it, right? So if it's at this time, we have this much time. If we hold by this person, it's that much time. So let's give a different example, right? Which is, if you remember, a couple of pages ago, it said, if I somehow lost or it died or whatever, and I wasn't able to bring it, and I was able to make a substitute, what happened to the timer? Does anyone remember? You were not here yet, so you're not responsible for now. Does anyone remember? The timer starts over. The timer starts
right.
over.
I thought it was.
Right. So then the question becomes, when does this timer start? Is it when I set aside the animal? If I've made the vow but I haven't set aside, has the timer started?
I don't think so.
Maybe, maybe not. I'm not offering an
Depends on
answer.
the type of vow you're doing.
Depends on the type of vow. Right. In this case, we're talking about an offering, right?
Like you've gone further with the second part. Like that's going a step further by already setting aside the other.
So if we're talking about like steps in this process, like there's vow, there's setting aside, and there's bringing it to the temple. So for you, you're suggesting that once we've gotten to the second part of this verse, we're already halfway in. Okay. So I think that makes sense. So these are cases, right, of these two verses. Is in one of these cases, and the other one's for the other case, right? So it's not a repetition. Let's spend some time digging into these examples. Is everybody with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay, so remember, the question we're answering is, why was it necessary for me to teach these multiple verses? Because it seems like a repetition.
Those other questions that come up that require additional teaching.
Correct. So, right. So the answer that we're being given here is, well, actually, we're talking about two different cases. So the question is, we need to prove that it's necessary to teach these things and these cases. That's the case that the Gemara is going to spend time with right now. All right, so I want to point out quick Aramaicism. So if you look at the first word of the next paragraph, it says Utsricha.
I love a sricha.
I know, they're fun. And at the very end, you'll notice the same word, Tzricha. So what this is it starts, and it is necessary, etc., 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 explanation. And at the end, it says, therefore, necessary. Right? So when you see these words, you can see we're capping this paragraph. Right? It's just because we're also learning how to do this. Okay. Well, you want to read for us the paragraph? And it is necessary.
And it is necessary to teach the halacha on both cases, as the Torah taught us, only about the halacha of the case where one said that he vowed to bring an offering but did not yet set aside a specific animal for his vow. One might have said that only in this case has he transgressed because he did not keep his word.
All right, let's pause. Let's spend some time with that. So, if the Torah had only taught us one of those, and in this case, we're going to start with the first one, which is, I vowed but did not set aside the animal.
But that doesn't mean you really did not keep your vow. You haven't completed it. Not really, you know?
So if I say,
Your vow is there that you didn't pick the animal, so you don't complete the vow, and I'm going to
right, so I
bring-
didn't, right, so if I say, I'm going to invite all of you for dinner, but I never send an invite, did I keep my word? Not whether or not,
No, you didn't.
no,
It depends on the time involved, so you...
I never sent an invite. I said,
Then you broke it.
right, I didn't keep my word. I said I was going to do something, and
Yeah.
whether or not I followed through is not the case. I didn't even do the thing I said I was going to do, which is the invitation, right? That's case one, right? We might have thought, right, that would be the only case, right? We need to teach two things because the second one is just as important. However,
if he set aside a specific animal for his vow but did not yet sacrifice it on the altar, one might say that anywhere that it is in his treasure house of the merciful one, as the world and everything in it belongs to God, and therefore it makes no difference if he delays bringing it to the temple.
Did you say treasure house of the merciful
Is that
one?
what I read without...
yeah,
Right.
That's what
Right,
I thought
so
I said.
that's Gaza de Rahman.
Right, so I saw this in the Aramaic, and I went, I don't know what this is. And then I saw his Hebrew translation, and I went, I don't know what it is. And now that I've heard it in the English, I don't know what it is. What is the treasure house of the merciful
Yeah.
one?
So
Other than a cool band name.
Right, so finish the paragraph and let's come back.
Is it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Therefore make it okay. It is necessary to teach that even when one does not set aside a specific animal, he transgresses the prohibition.
Okay. So the first case was that I didn't even fulfill what I said I was going to do. Then it says, however, if I specified Ed, the goat, right, but didn't go to the temple, can I use that goat for anything? No. As long as that goat is just sitting there eating grass, it's still God's goat. And what is the domain of God's, what is God's domain?
The whole world.
The
man.
whole world, the treasure house of the merciful one.
Well, and it's probably in the English too, but in the Aramaic, in the Hebrew, Steinsaltz on his commentary says, Sheharai ha'aretz umloa ladonai, which is a quote that we sing, is that weekday?
Yeah. It's that when we did
the whole
the
world
Torah.
belongs to God, right?
Right. So
Weekday Torah.
Weekday Torah.
Went
So-
to medical school. Bam.
I don't know how any of you can remember all of this.
Because it's in song form. If it wasn't in song form, I wouldn't remember jack.
There's so much to study and so much to read, and you don't have time to read it multiple times. You never get through what you're supposed to study in your lifetime.
that's why we
How do you remember it
that's
all?
why we meet on Monday mornings.
Because it's musical. Because he did it in musical form.
I have a bad memory, so I don't try and pretend to remember them. I do. So
Said you that sounds familiar, and I have no idea where it came from.
So, the presumption is, right, if everything belongs to God, it doesn't matter if I haven't brought it to the temple yet, according to this. Right? So it's important, it's necessary that I teach both halves of this, such that that obligation, right, does have some power behind it. Right? I need these cases, I need both of these verses to teach me these cases, such that I know that I have to keep my word. that part's the part that it focuses on. Right, and we're going to get to the second half in a second. Right, so we have these two cases. One in which I've said my vow, but I haven't fulfilled it. I haven't set aside an animal. One where I've set aside an animal and I haven't brought it to the temple. One of those has been resolved. Right? I needed the text to teach me about keeping my word, because if I said it and didn't do anything, then I haven't kept my word. But the other one, where I said, I've set it aside, but I haven't brought it to the temple, according to this, have I transgressed yet?
No.
No.
Because Ed still exists in the corporeal world.
And
Eating grass.
God's grass. Right? This is God's goat. We use God's grass on God's land. Right? Meaning to say, like, I haven't done... So far, everything is still kosher for Ed. Right? Ed is still living and still hasn't transgressed it. So it's necessary for us to teach one of those texts to teach us about the vow. But case A. Case B. Why don't you read the next sentence that ends with tzricha in the Aramaic, and I'll read the translation, and you can read the translation. Yeah. V'i ashmeina.
V'i ashmeinan afrish velo akrev. Tika mashahe le gabe, aval amar velo afresh eme dibura lo klumhu tzricha.
Now will you read the English for us? And the had.
And had the Torah taught us only about the case where one set aside a specific animal for his vow, but did not yet sacrifice it on the altar, one might have said, only in this case he has transgressed because he is keeping the animal for himself. But if he said that he vowed to bring an offering, but did not yet set aside a specific animal for the vow, one might say that his mere speech is nothing, and there is no transgression, provided he had not actually set aside the animal. Therefore, it is necessary to teach the halacha in both cases.
That just reversed it.
Yes, it did. Right? Meaning to say, if I set it aside, right, but I don't bring it to the temple, it's saying I've transgressed because now I'm being selfish. I didn't do what I said I was going to do.
So it's arguing for both cases.
Correct. Right? Because meaning to say, the other argument is, my words aren't meaningful unless I do action behind it. So if I say I'm going to do it, but I don't set aside the animal, it doesn't matter. Words are nothing. Words are just they don't hold any tangible value. So therefore, I may not have transgressed this. So it teaches both circumstances directed at each other, which means what? What was our original question?
Back to set aside but didn't bring, or
One step before that.
right? That's
The original question is what?
Why do I need both the line in Deuteronomy and the line in Vayikra?
Why did I need both of these verses? We said, oh, it teaches two cases. And now we get to see both cases. We need both because we might have thought the other thing. But instead we're being taught, actually, we needed both of these verses to teach us each of these cases. One in which I said I was going to do something, but I didn't start to follow through yet. Which in one case might say, right, that I didn't keep my word. Or on the other hand, my words don't mean anything. Right? So it
Well, that's
contains
the
both.
issue. How can you say that you didn't do it because you're keeping it for yourself? If you're not using it for anything, you can't say you're keeping it for yourself. You're just going to follow through.
That's
If
a
you're keeping it for yourself, you might be eating it or using it,
well, I could be mowing my lawn with the goat.
Exactly.
So that's
You're
me
using
using.
it.
Right.
But if you're not keeping it for yourself for that purpose, then you're really not keeping it for yourself. You're just keeping it because you didn't.
You're arguing an intentionality piece.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's a
Specific.
no. I think that's a fair critique of this, which is that piece where it says, "I may be keeping the animal for myself." It's not spelled out. I think your critique is totally fair.
And I told you we got in trouble many times for being that specific.
So there's basically
Yeah.
no right answer. Is that because it's arguing that either can be whatever, and either can exist. Either can exist.
Well, so the question it's answering is the following, right? Do I need both of these texts? What is the answer to? What is the answer the Gemara gives?
Yes.
It's necessary to teach both.
Right, and then they teach both. Why? Why is it necessary to teach both?
One is said but doesn't do. One is do but doesn't say. We're not exactly sure which is which, and so we can.
So they're not exactly in verses, right? Right, because there's 3 steps.
Right.
The question is, have I done step 1 or step 1 and step 2, right? So the question is this: did I need both of these verses? The answer to the Gemara is yes, because if I thought one of them, right, I might be free from the other one. And so that's the question the Gemara is answering. It's not that it hasn't resolved it. Is it resolved 2 situations independently and holding them both up?
Right. It's kind of silly, but it works in its own internal logic system.
Right. Well, no. So one example might be, let's do the
I think it's silly because if I said I'm separating out Ed and I'm going to donate him later, honestly, I wouldn't actually think I had fulfilled my vow in any way. But the Talmud is implying.
You're not saying you're keeping him for yourself either. It's still a donation.
So let me give a different example.
Anyways,
let me give a different
you
example.
go.
So let's say, right, we use the example of cleaning the room, right? And you say, and I'm right. So I'm told, right, clean your bed, clean off the chair, right, clean off the desk. On the other hand, I'm said clean up your room. So I cleaned up everything but the desk. Have I cleaned up the room?
You've not completed the task.
Well, if according to cleaning up your room, I've cleaned the room. The chairs, the bed is clear, the floor is clear.
That was listed in what you had to do, even though you did all of the other things. You didn't do the one thing that was involved with the command to clean your room.
Right. So there are 2.
So you missed it.
There are 2 commands here. One is to clean off these things separately.
Well, I'll get
and
your
one-
extra thing.
So the example is this, right? Which is, if I fulfill one, I may not have fulfilled the other. If I fulfill the other, and I may not have fulfilled the other one, right? So I need both teachings in order to know whether or not I've really cleaned my room or not.
It also doesn't address the fact whether you did it appropriately and did a complete job.
Let's assume, for the moment, right? It's not specifying whether or not how I killed the animal, right? So that's the case, the situation we're in. Is everybody with me so far?
As much as I'm gonna be.
Is there a question that feels unanswered?
No, I'm not so sure about I'm just not so sure about. You got it in a way that I don't get it, I think.
Okay, let's
just
spell it
you
out.
understood at that last piece that there was a thing where there's a reversal, and I think I understand it, but say it one more time.
Why don't you say?
I don't know what we're talking about.
There's two.
Spell it out.
There's 2 sets of strichas. There's stricha de iesh me'in amarla afrish, and then it
That's the number
stops.
1.
And then there's a second stricha that I read, and then you said you piped up and you're like, oh, it's totally the opposite of this. And you say what
because,
you were.
Because one is arguing that one is like transgression and one's God, and then the reverse is
that right? Okay, that's what I
Right.
thought.
So let's spell it out. Right. So
But
if,
I don't know. I don't
in
know
the circumstance, no, you were right. In the circumstance where I said I made a vow, right, but I didn't set aside the animal, right?
Right, first one.
Right? That's clearly a prohibition according to the first case, because I didn't keep my word. All right. So then, if I've set aside the animal but I've left it in my yard, have I transgressed? The first part says no, because why? It's still in God's house. The world is God's house. So I haven't transgressed according to that second circumstance. Mark, you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, second tzricha is the following. I set it aside, but I didn't sacrifice it, right? What's the transgression? I saved it for myself. And therefore, what isn't the transgression?
Just saying it.
Just saying it because it's just words. I didn't follow through with anything, and therefore I haven't transgressed. You with it now? Because words are meaningless.
You didn't fulfill it.
I didn't
So
in
that's
any
what
way.
That's what you haven't. So you haven't transgressed because you didn't do anything.
Because I only said something, and therefore correct. That's why it's not a transgression in case 2. But that's why we need them both, because all of it's a transgression. We need both cases because all of it is a transgression.
Yeah.
And if we only had one, we might not have gathered that.
I'm glad I did that.
Right?
Glad you-
Wait, so is it saying you just have to complete the thing then? You can't be doing any of this?
It means that it means that in both of these cases, we have not fulfilled our obligation and are liable. But we needed both of these cases spelled out with two separate verses, because without them, we would not have known, because we could have thought the other thing. Because each case gave us a transgression and a not transgression.
We might not have known that we transgressed.
Correct.
It happened both.
The answer is we did.
Stuff that showed you what to do.
This was we did it.
Exactly.
Which is why the desk example works really well, but also it's also about
Right, because
said
I
and did.
might have cleaned my room, but not the desk. And you said, no, you cleaned the room. I cleaned the room.
I mean, if you're ever going to teach or give a sermon on the concept of the road to hell is paved with good intentions, this is a really good text for that. If you could break it down and explain it, which is
Say
like
more.
You don't want to believe in hell, but you don't have to worry about it at all.
intending to do good and failing to do it doesn't absolve you, right? Like either you do something and it has ill consequences, and you can say, well, I meant good, right? Or the other way around, which is I said I was going to do something really good and I never actually followed through. I was like, well, I meant to do good, I just never actually gave the dollar, donated the money, right? Like they both suck and you're a bad person. Like that's on some level.
Right, so I think this is making... So I'm not sure this is saying that you suck, right?
I know. I've always... I speak in a little bit more black and white terms
Right, so I think what this
than
is
a
saying...
conservative rabbi should.
Right. So what I think this is saying, like the big takeaway, I think, is that when you have a multi-step process like this, we have 3 steps: vow, set aside, take to the temple.
Got to
Right?
complete it all, or it's just not done.
Right. We're taught a bunch of things in the Torah, and when we take them in isolation, right, only one text, right, we may not see the big picture. But in fact, by spelling out all of the various cases, we can actually see the bigger picture, which is, if I only learned one of these things, I might find a way to give myself an out, which I'm not really entitled to.
Right.
Right? But it's knowing that it's being able to see the big picture. It's being able to see all the different pieces in conjunction with one another. We can start to see that I have this obligation, and I need to do it all the way through. All right, everybody with me?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, we'll end there for today.